Hey, Jack.
Hey, Trevor, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome back to another episode of Hey, Jack, Leadership Reflections with Jack Nehlig. Jack, today we have a great topic that it's something that I've really come to appreciate a little bit later in life, even though I was actually embedded in this early in my career and all throughout growing up and sports and, all of that. But it's really about trust and teamwork. So, what are your thoughts on trust and teamwork? Where can we lead this conversation today?
Well, as you know, Trevor, this one's a really big one because if you think about teamwork, it's how work gets done today. And it's less about what your individual responsibilities are and more about what your total team is or some team that you're on. And teamwork has pervaded business now. So it's a very crucial topic. And there's a whole bunch out there about how to improve teamwork and that's a lot of good content. People should read that stuff. But it's a dynamic. It's a tough one to build high performance teams and make this work. And I like how we put the trust word with it. Kind of like last episode we did quality and excellence. There's two pieces to this thing. And definitely with teamwork, trust plays a big role. So why don't we start out with just talking about what I mean by trust and how it relates to teamwork. First of all, just defining trust, right? What is trust? When I talk about trust, I like to have people think about contracts. And you go, wow, what's about a contract? So think about the contracts in your life, your personal life, right? You have software agreements to do this kind of thing. You have a mortgage maybe or a rental agreement that you signed a contract. If you buy a car and have a loan, you have a contract with the bank. On and on and on, our lives are somewhat pervaded with contracts. And if you think about it, maybe I'll just ask you, why do we have contracts? Trevor, what would you say the reason for a contract is?
I would argue it's accountability. Hold somebody accountable to their end of the bargain in the form of something that's reciprocal. There's an expectation there.
That's exactly it. And that's sort of half of it. The other half of it is you have all that written down because you don't trust them.
I didn't think about that.
You have the contract because you don't have trust. So now flip it over on its head, right? So then what would be the ultimate contract? A bigger, thicker one in piles of paper? Actually, no, it's the opposite, right? The ultimate contract is no contract at all. It's just trust.
Trust.
Your relationship with your wife, your kids, your mother, your father, your best friend. It's trust. It's that bond that you have and will always be there. So how does that then relate to teamwork? Well, if trust is the ultimate contract in a relationship between two people, then it goes that it would probably be the best underpinning of high-performing teams. If you could get all the members of the team to trust each other and behave in a highly trustworthy way, right? That would probably be the best way to have the culture in the team perform. So now, flipping that on its head again, in business, take the worst case scenario, you have a manager and they're known as a micromanager. Everybody knows that topic, right? You don't want to be micromanaged, you want to be empowered, right? Well, what if this micromanager is running their department in a highly micromanaging way? What do you think those employees feel their boss thinks about them? They obviously feel that they're not being trusted to do their job. And then by definition, then we could guess that department is probably not overperforming, they're probably underperforming because the teammates on that department manager's team are very cautious because they don't want to make a mistake. They know what happens when they do that. Whereas in a highly empowered, trusting teamwork and trusting manager, you want your employees to go fast. You want them to make some mistakes and learn from them. You want them to get better every day. And so that's how trust relates to teamwork. It's the antithesis of micromanagement. It's the ultimate way you want to run your teams and the ultimate culture you want to have in your teams. Okay, now let's talk about teamwork. Tons written about teamwork. Yeah. Sports analogies are all over the place, and it's a lot of great content, and I love it. But I thought maybe I'd talk about 4 pillars that I like. But before we do that, let's underscore the importance of teamwork in a company. So the way to do that is try to imagine an org chart, just a basic org chart, manager, people working for the manager. And then blow it out in the company. Many, many managers reporting to directors, VPs, all this hierarchical structure with all these little one-dimensional lines through this thing. And if you think about it, it's a one-dimensional way work gets done. This department does that department does that department does that. And that's a simple picture.
Yeah, very siloed.
Very siloed and very, as I said a minute ago, one-dimensional. It's only just, we take care of this. But then if you actually study what goes on in the company, the departments interact. And there's all these teams. And if you drew lines of how each department interacts with every other department, just this department interacts with that one, and that one. Then this department interacts with that one, and that one. And you drew that org chart, it would be a matrix or a spider web of lines. And that is actually how work gets done, through that org chart. So each one of those interactions and people sharing each other's people on teams is how work gets done, and it makes the importance of teamwork be more important than just an org chart and who you report to, because we're all on multiple teams, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. So
that's teamwork, then the importance of teamwork. So now let me just touch on the maybe 4 pillars that I think matters most to high-performing teams or getting the most out of your teamwork. And the first one we mentioned originally in the beginning of this chat, and that is trust. Hopefully inside the company, it promotes a culture of trust, but at least in a team, you want to build that team on a culture of trust. So any leader responsible for a team should try to set that as groundwork. Trust is just a prerequisite to making teams perform really well. Imagine if you were on a team and the first thing the manager said was, this team, we've decided we're going to not trust each other, right? We're going to always be watching out for each other, and we're going to double check everybody's work, and we expect you to fail. And no, you want the opposite, right? You want, we trust each other, the ultimate relationship. Everybody have each other's back. So trust is the number 1 pillar of good teamwork. The second one is actually structure that I've seen over the years. The more well-structured a team, the better they perform. And what do I mean by that? People may know, and probably do know that are watching this, that there's certified project managers, and there's a certified project manager institute, and you can become a great project manager. And that's for really formal, big, high-performing teams. So then what do those project managers typically do? They add structure to the team's existence, if you will. They build a charter with a vision, steering committees, budgets, timelines, a rhythm at how often they'll meet, and on and on and on. So structure of any team is critical for that team to perform. So even if you don't have a project manager and you're a boss and you're setting up a team or you're running your own department, think in terms of what structure do I deploy for that team that they get to live in, and are there loose ends there? So you always want to build a nice structure, have it documented, make sure everybody understands the structure, and then they'll probably move forward in an organized fashion. That's really important. And I made those mistakes over the years. I pulled a team together and just talked about what we were going to accomplish, just the end goal, and didn't build the structure. Yeah. And I can tell you, I felt horrible about my leadership of those teams. So structure sort of number 2. Number 3 is an HR topic, and it's diversity, right? So over the years, as we taught, and I was able to teach diversity or be a part of teaching diversity, I used to talk about its importance to companies' competitiveness. And if you think about it, diversity is about respect, it's about the culture you want to have, and it's about competitiveness. And what I mean by competitiveness is when you look at teams, if you have a highly diverse team of talents and people's backgrounds and who they are, the more diverse a team, tends to be the higher performing team and tends to get the better answer. Whereas if you just have a monolithic team with one department or just a whole bunch of one set of engineers trying to tackle a project, they tend to suboptimize. They don't achieve as much as a highly diverse team. So I would encourage anybody setting up teams and running teams to make sure you have really strong diversity on your team, diversity of thought process, so that that team gets the best answer in the end. And then the last thing is actually, Trevor, it's a redo of 2 episodes ago, if I have this right, and that is positivity. And so we don't have to go over that today because we already did it 2 episodes ago.
Go back and listen to it if you haven't already.
Yeah, go back and listen to everybody. But positivity is critical to high-performing teams. And I will just give you 2 quickie little stories to underscore the point. If you're an NFL fan, and many of us are NFL fans, and I asked you who the GOAT was today, everybody would know who that is, right? They would probably say it's Tom Brady.
Tom Brady.
He's the GOAT. 43-year-old quarterback, most championships ever, Super Bowl wins, blah, blah, blah. Well, those who study Tom Brady would also know he's a little bit famous for harping on his players to do their job.
Do your job.
Do your job. And who can argue with that, right? You want to have individual accountability and you should do your job, right? I did my job, you do your job. But I have a little problem with just do your job. And that is when you watched him play and when he would deploy that, you would see him doing it during the game to a player who made a mistake. Of course they know they're supposed to do their job. And is it really helpful that Tom is walking over and pointing his finger at him and telling him to do the job in the heat of the battle?
Yeah.
Some might say yes. It is important for Tom to do that. I'd offer a different perspective. That it's not the time to do that. It might be the time to go tell him, hey man, don't worry, we'll get that back. And I like to use another analogy to explain the opposite of Tom Brady's behavior. And that would be women's volleyball. So have you ever watched women's volleyball, Trevor?
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not talking beach volleyball. I'm talking like collegiate volleyball in the gym stuff.
6-on-6?
6-on-6, exactly. Here we go. It's always fun to watch volleyball 6-on-6 in the gym. I'm just so amazed how fast that ball moves and the intensity of the competition. And it's the ultimate teamwork. I mean, these folks are really living a high-pressure environment, right? Well, and the women do this a little better than the men, although the men do it too, I don't know if you ever noticed, when the ball hits the floor on a team's side, in other words, they missed a point, all right? They're going to give up a point. If you watch what women's volleyball does, they immediately come together in a huddle. I mean, it happens that fast. And they're yapping at each other in that huddle. Can you imagine what they're probably saying, Trevor? Do you think they're saying do your job?
They're not saying do your job.
I don't think they're saying that. I think I've never been in one of those huddles, but my guess is they're saying positive things like, we got this next point. Don't you worry. I got your back. It wasn't you. Whatever. It was me. People are positive, instantly positive, to try to keep their spirit up and their performance up.
Yeah.
So when I think of positivity in terms of teamwork, I always think of that volleyball analogy, and I try to not think of Tom Brady's one-dimensional device to us to do our job, which we all should be doing our job, obviously.
Yeah, either way, yeah.
Yeah. So that's it. I believe trust, right? Some structure, sound diversity, good diversity on a team, and then lastly, positivity. And those are the 4 things I think are really the recipe for high-performing teams and teamwork. So to close this, I was trying to think of another analogy to help people. And, like the women's volleyball teams, I think, a fantastic analogy of great teamwork. And the one that I love to remember is the geese flying in a V. You know that story, maybe?
Yeah.
Right? So people should know that story. If they don't, right, they fly in this V formation up above, and they're trying to get somewhere. They're going from Canada to Florida for the winter, and they're going Florida back to Canada for the summer. And they fly in that V. Well, you study the V, and it's all well publicized, right? Because they fly in the V, and there's one goose in the lead, the rest of the geese have a 70% reduction in the force that they feel. So that one leader goose plays a huge role in that team.
Makes the job easier for everybody else.
But what's amazing is that goose isn't any different than any other goose on that team. They're all geese. And there's no structure, no word chart saying that one's more important than the other one. It's just their turn to lead. And then they rotate out. When that goose gets tired, that goose goes to the back. And then another goose takes the lead. And they're all trusting each other to get the work done, right? To get where they want to go. And evidently, it's also said that the reason they're always honking when they fly by, you always hear them, honk, 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 honk. It's the other geese are cheering on the leader.
I've not heard that.
I don't think they're saying do your job, although
I've not heard that.
I think they're doing the volleyball analogy. They're encouraging that leader to go. They're giving them positive reinforcement. And then they get tired and they go to the back and they turn and they turn and they turn. And then the other great part about that story with the geese is evidently if one of them feels sick or can't continue, they go to the ground. Two of the other geese go to the ground with them to make sure they're okay. So again, trusting relationships. You're just trusting these other geese to go take care of that goose and bring them back to the formation if they can. So anyway, I think the geese flying in a V analogy is a great way to remember positive teamwork. And although there's tons said and tons published about great teamwork, I think those 4 pillars are pretty easy to remember and could and should help people run teams better.
Yeah, I think that's great information there. And I think this is one of those topics. This is why I really enjoy these conversations, because I think when you hear trust and teamwork, it's one of those things that it sounds so easy to brush off, kind of like positivity. And we really dug deep into that. And when we really break it down, kind of how you broke it down, you start to realize there's a lot of layers to this. And a lot of great things come out of teamwork and trust. And one of them I think of immediately is just innovation. And I know just over my career, you do get a sense of power when you see teams in the organization, when you can trust them and you see the teamwork. It's amazing how it lifts your own positivity in what's possible just because you have that trust. Whereas I think it's one of those things that, again, it makes cultures so amazing that you can trust leaders, employees, teams as a function, as a whole. It's pretty amazing. And so I really enjoy us peeling back these layers. And again, I think it's one of these things where you hear these words, and if you were just to lay them all out on a sheet of paper, you'd be like, oh, trust, positivity, got it, I'm a leader. Right? But when you really start to look at it, there's a lot that goes into this. And it takes a lot of work to implement these things. So I really appreciate you sharing these insights with us. And I'm sure the audience listening does as well.
Yeah, well, let's hope. We hope we can help people improve on a day-to-day basis, that's for sure.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with Tom Brady, who's going to give his side of his leadership approach.
He'll be our guest host.
He'll be the guest host next week. So tune in to see if he is the guest host. We'll get those views up. But next week we'll be back. We'll be talking a little bit more about some other leadership topics and reflections here. We've got some good ones lined up. So if anyone has any leadership questions, or if they have any insights or would like us to probe further or deeper on anything that we've talked about already, there is a link in our show notes here where you can go submit a question. You can do that by putting your name in, and we'll give you a shout out on the show with your question. If you want to submit it anonymously as well, you can just leave that off, and we'll keep that anonymous when we tackle that. So as always, appreciate you, Jack, and I appreciate everyone tuning in here today.
Thanks, Trevor. Go lead, everybody.